Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, Force over here, welcome back to more of the live reading stream that I did earlier. This is a continuation of sorts to the stream that I was doing earlier today. So, we are just continuing where we left off. I was on page 92, and we are going to try to finish the rest of the story. It's not too far done, we're not too far away from it. So without further ado, let us continue with where we left off. I stood in front of the cheap cardboard backdrop with a single camera pointed at me. I was going to start by interviewing Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express. Jim, the cameraman asked, we ready to shoot? I nodded as I checked my notes. Showtime. All the boys were watching. We'd do New Orleans first and we'd take it from there, I replied. I could see the Rock and Roll Express moving closer, just off camera, getting ready to join me when the time was right. I wasn't really sure about their interview style yet, as they were pretty new to the company, having just come in via a recent trade with the Memphis territory. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people in the room had. A few months prior, the live gates were going down a bit, and it was apparent that to Watts that we needed some new faces. He reached out to Jerry Jarrett from the Memphis territory and negotiated a trade deal to benefit both companies. The Memphis owners were invited by Watts to come to a couple of our shows to have a look around. The idea was that both Mid-South and Memphis would trade talents to freshen up their respective rosters and ignite fresh new feuds to catch the fans' attention. As part of the negotiation process, Bill even went so far as to ask one of the Memphis owners to sit in with me to call a match. As a kid who regularly read the wrestling magazines, I was well aware of the King of Memphis. We had many mutual friends, so when I finally met Jerry Lawler in person, it felt like we already knew each other. Jerry had hundreds of hours of TV experience under his belt, so we meshed immediately and seemed to suit each other's style perfectly. He was easy to work with, glib and knew what to say, and more importantly, knew what not to say. During the match, I tried more than once to catch King's eye, but he seemed to be more interested in surveying the women in the audience. He was scouting out territory, and the amount of women at the show was an indicator that the babyfaces were over and doing their job for the female fans. So old habits didn't die hard, did it, Jerry? If you don't get the reference, it's the fact this man would always say things toward the women wrestlers so often, especially during the Attitude Era. When they'd seen enough, Lawler and his partner Jerry Jarrett, both successful bookers, had a few pieces of advice. First, they said that in most cases, Bill's heels should be the baby faces and vice versa. It was an interesting point because we did have a lot of dynamic, athletic youngsters in villainous roles, while many of our protagonists were older, bulky brawlers. Part of the problem with that setup was that in those days, the babyface's duties frequently included servicing the female fans, to keep them coming back and buying tickets. As the announcer, part of my job was to get across how much of a ladies' man a young hero was. They ended up making a talent trade to help the overstocked Jarrett clean out some of his mid card and to help Mid South get younger, new talents. The deal was simple. Memphis could have anyone except the Junkyard Dog, and Watts could have anyone but Lawler, manager Jimmy Hart, or the Fabulous Ones, Stan Lane and Steve Cairn, who were the top tag team in Memphis. We agreed to send Rick Rude, who was just a rookie, Larry Hacksaw Higgins, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Watts went to Memphis to scout out their talent, and he returned with a list of names that would rejuvenate Mid-South, making 1984 its most profitable year. We received the Rock and Roll Express and their eventual rivals The Midnight Express, Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey with manager Jim Cornette. And it was through watching Cornette getting an ass chewing from Watts that I learned one of the most valuable lessons about interviewing. Watts created the Midnight Express by taking Eaton, who was a middle of the road babyface, and teaming him up with Condrey, who was a heel at about the same level as Eaton. Cornette, who had only been in the business for a little more than a year, was Memphis's secondary manager of bad guys, behind perennial investigator Jimmy Hart. Cornette's gimmick was that of a rich mama's boy, a spoiled brat whose mother was spending her wealth on wrestlers for her obnoxious son to manage. When he came in to do his first interviews on behalf of the team, I introduced Cornette with tremendous fanfare. I described him as the manager of one of the most skilled, controversial, sought-after teams in the world. Cornette blistered me with one-liners, one after another. He'd seen that work for Jerry Lawler in Memphis when announcer Lance Russell was such a beloved institution that making fun of him was enough to garner angst for a villain. Cornette made fun of my hair, my suit, my accent, and my home state. I never said a word, largely because there wasn't a second for me to say anything. It was an impressive display of verbal chops. Cornette barely seemed to take a breath. When the barrage was over, I had a brief opportunity to end the spot with, and the Midnight Express will debut this Saturday night in the Municipal Auditorium. We ended the spot, and Watts had some choice words for us, many of which begin with the letter F. I don't think you need to guess what word that was. The last thing in my lifetime I want to see is you and my announcer wrestle a match, Bill told Cornette. Since I have no plans to book that for as long as I live, your clever diatribe didn't sell me one damn ticket. So we're going to do this again, and this time I want you to mention the name of the town, your opponents, and tell me a little about your team. Jim Ross gave you a hell of an introduction. He put your guys over, even though you're heels, because as a representative of Mid South, he's got no dog in the he's got no dog in the hunt. You need to focus on the guys who do, and those are your opponents. Cornette impressed me by not feeling overwhelmed, by not taking the ass chewing personally, and, most of all, by showing that he truly got it. He took the Cowboys' instruction and delivered an excellent promo a few seconds later when we did our second take. When it was over, Watts walked back over and told Cornette, "Now that was exactly what we need. If you can continue to improve on that and stay on that track, we're going to make a lot of money together." And Cornette did stay on that track. He recognized what a big break Watts had given him, a chance to be a villainous manager on a main event level. He was living his dream. And I learned a great lesson on who to focus on when interviewing. A lesson I was about to put to work as I stood in front of the camera on my own and waited for the Rock and Roll Express to join me. The cameraman counted us down. 3, 2. "I'm standing by with the Rock and Roll Express," I said as Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson stepped into a shot on cue. Who returned to New Orleans this Thursday to face Jim Cornette's Midnight Express. I could tell that both men were tired and a little cranky. Wednesdays were a real grind with half the guys coming in from the previous night's show in Little Rock, more than 200 miles away, and the other half coming from a spot show in Louisiana. "Well," Ripley began, I had heard that Robert Gibson was known as Hoot Gibson. I figured this nickname wasn't anything to do with trumpet playing abilities, but it did involve a skill. Simply put, Hoot would pride himself on lacing his and Ricky's long car journeys with the most vile, smelly farts known to modern man. These were the kind of hoots that were so disgustingly potent that they could actually make you angry from having to experience them. And as Ripley was also Robert's travel partner, they would drive hours to get to TV in a car filled with Robert's farts to have a match, wait for their chance to promo over and over, just to get back in the car to make another turn, to make another town, where Robert could have driven crop dust Ricky the whole way. Fans are clamoring to see this epic confrontation, gentlemen, I said as I cut back in. Ripley was now looking distracted and a little lost. I continued. And Ricky, I know that Robert's good friend Junior is especially concerned about the potential career-ending scenario that you two face this coming week. Robert's good friend Junior was actually his penis. That's what he called it, so I thought referencing it might lighten the mood a little. I just want to get it done, Ricky said, obviously wanted another go at the promo. Okay, I said. We were set. The room was looking at us, waiting for us to get it done. Time was ticking, and a lot of large, tired men were waiting their turn. I raised my mic again. Fans are clamoring to see this epic confrontation, gentlemen. And Ripley, I know that Robert's good friend Junior is especially concerned about the... Ripley interrupted me. No, I don't want... I just want to do it straight. Okay, sorry, I said. No more Junior. Ripley suddenly stared at his partner. Robert smiled a little as it looked like Ripley was about to kill him. I tried again. Fans are clamoring to see this epic confrontation, gentlemen. That could end up being a potential career-ending scenario for you in New Orleans this coming week. As I looked across to both their faces, Ripley was now filled with rage, to Robert was a picture of pure joy. Gentlemen, I said, trying to get them both to focus on the job at hand. Ah, Jesus, Ripley said as he stormed out of the shot. You fucking asshole. This is bullshit. I'm done. I'm gone. I'm out of here. What just happened? I asked Robert, who was still standing beside me at the shot. Give it a second, he replied. I replayed my opening line back in my head in fear that I might have said something to piss off one member of the most popular tag team in the company. Ripley! I shouted. Wait! And before I could finish my sentence, I got why Ripley was so pissed and Robert was so proud. When I said I got why Robert was so proud, I mean I got it straight in the eye. Yes, the eye. That bastard had conjured up a fart so toxic that it burned my eyes a little before it violated my nostrils. Robert's smile broke into a chuckle when he saw how much distress I was in. You need to get yourself checked out or something, I said, as I, too, stepped out of the shot. In truth, I was a little panicked, as a few months prior I had heard about the Bull Belinsky incident. Bull flashed his opponent off camera during an interview, and Cowboy, who saw it, fired Bull on the spot. No debate, no conversation. What happened? The clever man whispered to me. Simpson poisoned us both. You didn't get that? I replied. Not yet, he said. You will. You think Bill saw? He's not here, the clever man said. I smiled. You really believe that? Watts was watching from the control room. I knew he was. There was no way he was leaving me there alone on my first outing. Jesus Christ, the clever man finally said as he pulled his t-shirt over his nose. Told you, I said as I looked around to see if my boss was approaching me yet. But it wasn't my boss that was about to get hot. No wonder the houses are so small if this is the way we're doing business, said a deep voice from the back of the room. Hacksaw Jim Dutton was waiting to cut his promos and wasn't happy about the waiting around. Ernie Ladd retorted, If you were over, we could draw the people into them arenas. Now I've got a situation where two ex-NFL players, two alpha males who had probably never backed down in the confrontation of their lives, were getting ready to go nose to nose. If Cowboy was watching from the control room, I was praying for him to come out and save me. You want to step outside? Duncan asked Ernie from the other side of the room. Ernie rose from his seat, all 6'9" of him, and began to slowly walk toward Hacksaw. Jim, why don't you go out for a ride? I said as I walked into the path of both tough guys. Go on, clear your head and we'll knock your stuff out later. The why don't you go for a line ride? The ride line was something I saw Cowboy use a ton of times when guys would get pissed and unproductive. The wrestler would get in their car, and before they hit the end of the road, clouds of smoke would be escaping from the open windows. Miraculously, the wrestler in question would come back perfectly chilled. Duncan left. Ernie sat down. I wanted to go to a dark room and change my shorts. Ernie understood Duncan's frustration, though. Duncan was going out and having bloody brawls every night and working as snug and as violently as he could. After 7 straight nights of cutting his own forehead, Duncan's head was... Alright, let's try this again. Duncan left. Ernie sat down. I wanted to go to a dark room and change my shorts. Ernie understood Duncan's frustration, though. Duncan was going out and having bloody brawls every night and working as snug and as violently as he could. After 7 straight nights of cutting his own forehead, Duncan's head was tender, his body was sore, and oftentimes his money wouldn't be as much as he'd like it to be. By the 4th or 5th night on the road, he could get the blood flowing without even using a blade, because by that point his thumbnail or a stiff shot from an opponent was sufficient to make him bleed. Okay, are we all ready now? I asked as I walked back to the camera. Robert Gibson was still there, and I could see Ricky walking back toward us. Let's do this, I mumbled to the cameraman. Ricky stopped mid-stride. Robert smiled, and the cameraman covered his face with him. God damn it, Robert! Ricky shouted as he turned and walked away once more. This man... He's such an asshole. In a good way, this man is such an asshole with what he's doing here. Jeez. Chapter 17. At the Top Table, 1984. People measured their rising worth in the wrestling business differently. Some of the boys knew the company was backing them when they got higher in the card, while others knew when their payoffs grew. I knew my stock was rising when I got to eat dessert with the big cat, Ernie Ladd. One of the official rituals after the promos was that Bill would sit with the booker to finalize our TV lineup and what was happening in the upcoming of the feuds. It was a small, closed club of 2. Usually. You coming, Jim? Watts said to me after promos. Me? I asked. Yeah, Ernie said as he waited by the door. We're going to sit you under the learning tree. I felt like running toward the boss and the booker, but I knew I had to keep my cool. Grateful, but not excited. Poised, but not cold on the invitation. The small, closed club of 2 was open for one more. Me. Not only was I back inside the wrestling world, I was learning more, taking on more, and living more than I had done before. I had been to booking meetings previously, but mostly as a note-taker for Leroy. This time I was invited to be at the booking meeting. Give my opinion, listen, learn, and understand what really made this business tick. The reasons why a certain person or a certain match was the right way to go. But before the booking came with the eating, and both Cowboy and Ernie loved to eat. Buffet style. Now, normal portions of food weren't of any interest to Ernie Ladd. As he walked to the buffet line, I could see him lick his lips right around the roast beef on display. The bored server behind the counter didn't even look up before robotically asking, "What can I get you?" It was showtime for Ernie, time for a little charm, to bid a little extra. Now you know you're feeding Ernie Ladd, young lady, he said to the 65-year-old server. She looked up to see the huge, handsome man in front of her. I'm not like your little scrawny husband at home, he continued. So how about a little more for the big cat? 'Cause, you know, he whispered as he leaned over to her, I'm 6'9", 320 pounds, and my feet cover the grounds I walks on. The server lady plainly laughed. Well, you know what else they say about a man with big feet? He has big shoes, Bill dryly answered, cutting into the middle of the flirtations. Ernie beamed his movie star smile back at her and walked away with twice the serving of any other person in the place. It was my turn next. I'm Jim Ross, I said to the same lady. And I'm... She immediately cut me off. Don't care, she said as she walked away. I stood in shock as I struggled to see what the difference was. Apart from not having Ernie's looks, charm, charisma, stature, or presence, we were practically the same person. I rapidly left the counter, hoping no one else heard our interaction, and stopped at the dessert station on my way to the table. Cowboy and the big cat buzzsawed their way through the food as I cleared a small space for my apple cobbler a la mode. Both big men, both had big appetites. You're turning into the junk food dog, said to me. You need some real nourishment in your body. I knew he was right, but apple cobbler was my comfort food. It reminded me of home and my mama, who was the cobbler queen. You won't get far in this business eating ice cream, Ernie said. Real men eat lots of protein. I could see a cowboy try not to laugh as he filled his mouth with meat and gravy. You ever feel a grown man who walk wait, you ever fear a grown man who talked out the side of his neck while eating ice cream? Ernie asked. No, me neither. Me either. When the big cat spoke, I still wasn't sure whether I should listen, reply, or take notes. Before I chose either option, Ernie had moved on and was now waving to the server lady over my shoulder. He scooped some of my dessert onto his fork and ate it. That's good, he said with a smile. You should have some. And have some I did. If it was good enough for Ernie, it was good enough for me. Thing was, Big Cat was even more of a legendary figure to me because I knew who he was before either of us got into wrestling. He had played for the Houston Oilers and Kansas City Chiefs, but his greatest football days may have been as a San Diego Charger, where he had led his team to 4 American Football League championships. As a kid, I had several of his football cards, so I was in awe of him when we first met. Because of his background, Ernie understood top-level athletes as few others did, and that meant he fit right in with Bill's serious sports-based approach. Apart from all the wisdom and logic Ernie taught me about the wrestling business, he also taught me about life as an African American, something I never got to hear too much of in my hometown. When I was a child in Oklahoma, it was illegal for African Americans to live anywhere they wanted in the country, not because of the beliefs of the people who lived there at that time, but because of one of those old segregation laws. I grew up with a law in my country that literally said it was illegal for a black man summer to see the sunset while standing in Adair County. Maybe it was due in part to my mother's Native American ancestry, but I was not raised in a racist household. Some of the Caucasians viewed Native Americans as another race, just as they viewed African Americans. My parents raised me to see that kind of prejudice as embarrassing, but because of the homogeneous nature of Adair County's demographics, I grew up not understanding the plight of African American people, especially in the tumultuous 1960s. In the 1960s, giving all the people civil rights and equal treatment just seemed like it was a no-brainer to me. As a kid, I always made a point of listening to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when one of his speeches was being broadcast. The day after, I'd look in the paper for snippets of his words, or full transcripts if I could get them. The young one wordsmith in me considered these speeches as a treat, that, that as much for this presentation and the pottery of his language as for his message of equality. It compelled me to think those about other people's experiments, and he did it in my preferred way, with spoken elegance and impact. In his own way, Ernie was also a trailblazer. He was the first major African American wrestling villain in the 1960s, where most promoters were scared that such a thing would lead to race riots in the areas. Even by the time I came to wrestling, each territory had more than one or two black wrestlers in that feature positions, and never in the same manner. Uh, never in the same man, I should say. Except in Mid South, where Watts was sure about the black booker. Black, black, what, anyway, let's see. Even if, even by the time I came to wrestling, each territory had no more than one or two black wonders and fears, positive, negative, about uh, even by the time I came to wrestling, each territory had no more than one or two black wrestlers in featured positions, and never as the main man, except in Mid South, where Watts used both a black blocker for Ernie and a black top star for JYD. Watching Ernie's work had already taught me tremendous lessons about getting across the point of the promo, just as the person, taught me about what life meant to be about. These series, uh, let's see here. Oh, I just noticed that. So, you all know the drill. Oh, turn that on. Plug this in. Anyway. Watching work had already taught me tremendous lessons about getting across the point in the promo, just as he, the person, taught me about what it meant to live with prejudice he had confronted his whole life. It's not, uh, it's not enough for people to hear the order, to hear the noise. Then you must have taken it in the own message. He told me, you make them feel something, good or bad. And I sat there listening to two of the best ever laying out the territory and positioning their points. So Wisconsin is home. Let's see. And I sat there listening to one of the two best songs, laying out the territory of the fishing plants. You know, but there you go. Anyway, good or bad. And I sat there listening to two of the best ever, laying out the territory and polishing their finer points. When he was done both booking and eating, um, Ernie rubbed his belly and stood up from the table. You taking me home? He asked Bill. Cowboy shook his head a little in disbelief. Drive yourself home, Watts explained. Come on, Eric said just as he turned and walked out of the. Hmm. Cowboy shook his head a little in disbelief. Drive yourself. Drive yourself. Evans. See, then we already went past that bit, so yeah. Hmm. Well then. That escalated, didn't it? Alright. Come on, Ernie said as he turned and walked out of the cafeteria a few steps ahead of us. Why does he want you to take him home? I asked Bill as we followed behind. Watch, Bill replied. When we got down into the parking lot, Ernie stood beside his navy blue Lincoln Continental with the driver's door open. Bill had given Ernie the car for a job well done. This story, Eric said that he was going to puzzle, going to, mm, whoa, Billy replied. When we got down into the parking lot, Ernie stood beside his Evie naval mother, Donna Louise. Right, right. Yeah, I was just thinking about something. Sorry. Anyway, the hardest driver, Ernie said, using his nickname for Bill. Junk food can sit shotgun, and I'll take the back seat. Sound good? Bill laughed and did just as he was told. What's happening? I whispered before we got to the car. Bill didn't have any time to explain before we were all searched by you crazy. The text. Alright. I think pausing in the middle of reading these sentences, I'm sorry. Anyway. The hardest driving really, and he said right. What's happening? I whispered before we got on the car. The building didn't see an explosion before we went over the exercise of the window. This is right. I had no idea. I had no idea on that drive that Ernie was winding down to traumatize with this motivational work. But not before he got the last laughed. Last laugh. When Ernie left the business, we got, we got, not before he got the hat to drive him for a small town to see. When Ernie left the business, we got one per booker for Memphis superstar Bill Dundee. It was a huge boost for us. Watts brought him in as strictly to book the shows, but wouldn't let him be himself. When Walmer's controversy distracted me, it was an understandable booster for us. From 64 NES to the Lemon Planet. Alright. Watt's concern was that a 5'7" Aussie would book himself to conquer. Watt's tough giants. Bill just didn't see it as realistic, and if it wasn't real, then Bill didn't want it on his TV alone. Dundee continued to bargain Watts. You can wrestle, Watts said. I can? I'm sick of listening too. I knew you'd say same. Webber's audience consisted of damn it, I knew it was just staring blankly at stuff. People gonna think I'm crazy for doing that. I'm sick of listening to you. I knew you'd see sense. But the second I see you trying to make yourself the centerpiece, Watts said, and I'm pulling you out of there. Deal, Dundee replied. Deal, Warren said with a handshake. Within a month, Dundee tried himself to put in favorite one of Aladdin's Spider-Man legend. Yeah. Anyway, Bucks of the Future. Here we go. Alright. But that month, Dundee tried to put himself in featured roles and Bill pulled him back out again. But as a booker, Dundee helped concoct some incredible stories and feuds. He pushed for smaller, higher-paced wrestlers to get more prominent promotions. The Rock and Roll Express, the Freebirds, Lake Detroit, and Cordery were below pizza standards. Below pizza standards. And if they're doing that, the Rock and Roll Express, the Fantastics, Terry Taylor, Dennis Condrey, and Bobby Eaton with manager Jim Cornette all began to rise to the top of the cards and pull the audience with them. It was a noticeable shift away from the larger football player types that had become a staple in the territory. Aside from Bonkers, Cowboy was also shaking things up with his announcements too. Once Angel Boyd, let's see. One week when Boyd Pierce would become the ring announcer and I would handle play-by-play commentary as Bill's son Joel served as color commentator, we'd take turns between shower breaks and then settle in for 4 downwards. Okay. How many times am I gonna keep staring off into space for no real reason? I don't know. I'm not that too far away from that page either. Motherfucker. Alright. Let's see. Apart from bookers, Cowboy was also shaking things up with his announcers too. Right. This we take the in between show breaks and then settle in for the second show of the taping. Only now I was ring announcer while Boyd and Bill were called the matches for the TV audience. Despite his youth, Joel knew what the boss wanted because Joel had grown up under his roof. Joel put together the amazing videos for his father's shows. Besides my increasingly frequent TV announcing duties, I continue to be a bigger part of the booking meetings. My theory on how to contribute to the creative direction was pretty simple. If I saw Bill writing something on the yellow legal pad he always brought with him, it would be the movie. It would yeah yeah it'd be approve me in to do the same because Bill wasn't going to waste energy by writing down a meaningless point. One day when I saw him simply write the letters JYD in his pad, I knew something was up. The junk food dog was getting more and more entrenched in the company, but the real junkyard dog had already made a deal to leave. Yeah, I definitely could have read the rest of that chapter better. But, it's fine. It's fine. No worries. Chapter 18. Changes from New York. Oh, there. Alright, Chapter 18. Changes from New York. I was spending more and more time in the bubble of the wrestling business. My parents were getting divorced and my own marriage was beginning to wobble again. The business began to reestablish itself as my obsession, my reason for getting up in the morning and going to bed at night, late at night. I was learning, hustling, and moving up in the company, but I was putting my family, my daughter, in the second place because of the long hours and the chaotic lifestyle. I worked in front of the camera and behind it. I was making sales promotions, and promoting events. Mid-South was my life, and as I was burying myself deeper because the stupid should just soared to anyone. Junkyard Dog signed with WWF. No notice, no nothing. Wrong on all fronts. Even before Vince McMahon began his national push, the New York territory had always been the goal for most pro wrestlers. WWF shows were in the most densely populated areas in the country, which meant that the crowds were bigger, which meant the pre-ops were tossed big just to stay on two. 104. No noise, no notice, no nothing, yada yada. We don't really care about this. Let's see here. WWF shows were in the most densely populated areas in the country, which meant the crowds were bigger, which meant the payouts were better, and the virtually any other territory, no one could fault a name for moving on to a bigger money. But in the wrestling business, there was a way to move on, a war to do it right now. Hmm. As we sat and wrote TV, Watts veered from angry to reflective to dejected. You don't do that, he said. You don't just walk out on this territory like that made you a star without giving you with Snow gave AGW a 3-time star. Alright. Uh, as we sat and wrote TV, Watts veered from angry to reflective and dejected. You don't do that, he said. You don't just walk out on the territory that made you a star without giving notice. Forget it. Wishing wishing making a star is somewhat of ease on your way out. Let's see here. Mm. Right. Okay, there we are. We had all the other segments arrive, but Bill wanted to leave some space in the show to talk to the folks at home. As the red light came on at the taping, I had no idea what was going on, he said, but I knew it was going to be flattering as JYD. Mm. Okay, then. Back to the story. As introduced the show to the audience at home, Bill sat beside me at his desk with a headset on and a little slip of paper in his hand. He raised the subject of JYD and said, Junkyard Dog was a great superstar for a lot of time, and I think a lot of pressure that Butch Reed put onto him finally affected him. The only thing that I disagree with is he made a tertiary. He's made a lot of he's made a he's been under the gun for 5 years here, and Butch Reed is an awesome individual, and shaped by Linda. Um, uh, he's under the gun for 5 years here. Butch Reed is an awesome individual, and apparently, kind of made him crack or do something. He saw greater positions, so too. We know this is unemployed, and yeah, um, first about it there, but alright, I think we're good now. The only thing I did is he's been under the gun for 5 years here, and Butch Reed is an awesome individual, and apparently by trade, made him crack or do something. Made made there we go. All right. Uh, we don't know. This is all summation and speculation, but certainly he's not here, and he didn't show up at the matches he was booked against. But the match he was booked against Butch Reed, and of course Reed and Lundell are going to take a lot of credit for that. Mid South is known as the toughest competitive wrestling area in the world today. Cowboy continued on cemetery. Uh, how many times have I dozed off a little bit where I'm just looking at my book and not really saying nothing? Probably 5 to 10 times now, I guess. We then cut to Boyd Pierce, who was in the ring with one of the toughest men alive, Dr. Death Steve Williams. I watched Cowboy try to pretend that his feelings weren't hurt. Mid-South is known as the toughest competitive wrestling scene in the area in the world today, Cowboy continued on some commentary. By all the wrestlers themselves, they acknowledge that the area is the finest, is the toughest. Hacksaw Butch Reed seems to have been surprised with why the tremendous presenter he got on, presumably to guarantee his ownership in XK1, SKEW01. There's that. Um, Down to 1.6. See. Mid-South is known as the toughest competitive wrestling area in the world today. Da, 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 da. He knew Butchery seems to have been surprised. Butchery seemed to be surprised with the tremendous pressure he's put on. Probably the greatest athlete I've ever seen in a long time in wrestling. For all of JYD's personal problems to apparently cause hate from to more than to more or to not more uh to carry yourself for the time being. Yes. Uh mm, can't really read that bit, but alright. It's okay, I like to listen while I work, so when you pause, it makes me look up and refocus. Oh, that's good. That's nice. Yeah, never keep. It's okay to listen to a reading, but it's always better to pay attention. Yes, indeed. So I guess that's something. Throughout the show, Cowboy continued a severe burial. His biggest star had left with no notice. Bill had to spin the situation back to his advantage as much as he could. Traditionally, if a territory star he helped make the next star on his way out. Bill was livid that JYD would leave in a way that showed no respect for the boys, the territory that had made him a star, or for the business in general. No matter what Bill thought of another promoter, he would never have wanted a guy coming in Mid-South to step out on the place he was leaving. But I knew as I watched him that what hurt Cowboy the most was that dog broke a bond that he and Bill had. Sylvester Ritter, the person was special to the big cowboy, and when he left, Bill felt like he had lost a family member. A family member who had just simply walked out and left him high and dry. I find out I found out that in wrestling, true friendships weren't all that easy to come by. I also found out when Cowboy came off the camera that his mind immediately veered to the business end of the situation. We're not going to get the last match out of the dog, so we can't build a new star that way, Bill said. Who else we got coming up? We've got to keep our territory fresh, come up with something new. Watts wasn't going to lie down and let his ticket sales take a hit. He knew in wrestling that if you're coasting, you're dying. The biggest enemy to any wrestler, booker, and company in general Was the dreaded comfort zone. Wrestling all that wrestling was all about next, the next new thing, and the next new thing was coming, but it was coming from New York. Ah, yes, remember this. is taking place in 1984 and going on to 1985. So, for all the wrestling geeks out there, what sort of wrestling event started in 1985? I'll give you one hint. The New York, he just mentioned the New York territory. The New York territory in question was the WWF, now WWE. What was the big event that came out in 1985 that started it all? I'm still gonna read it, but that's the question for you guys. Let's see if you don't have to say it, just think it. WrestleMania? What the hell is a WrestleMania? I heard Watts' secretary Georgiana Saya proclaim. Paul Bost had called and told Watt that New York was planning something big, something that could succeed hugely or pull down the new young promoter who was attempting it. Despite the skepticism and cynicism from those around him, Cowboy knew it was going to be good for everyone if this idea hit. I knew it was good for our business too, as I was the person responsible for selling the Mid-South TV show in new syndicated markets. Up until then, station managers didn't have that much product knowledge. Wrestling was wrestling to them. But once WrestleMania came along, those station managers could see that wrestling was cool, getting a lot of mainstream exposure and nudging its way back into the public psyche again. Watts put me on the road even more to sell our show to stations around the region. I might be interested in wrestling again, but of all the shows out there, why should I buy yours? The station manager of WWL asked me. I knew the question well, and I also knew how to answer it. Would you mind, I said, handing over a document from my briefcase. I had the numbers of their own rating service, Nielsen and Arbitron, ready to go. As you can see, our shows do really well in other established markets, I said. I could tell by his face as he read the numbers, and he was surprised at the ratings and shares that we were earning. These were legitimate numbers using their own terminology and service to measure a viewership that turned heads. After a few months, I was doing so well that I couldn't keep up. I had to talk to Cowboy about getting a little help to sell. The World Wrestling Federation, at the time, was helping all ships rise on its ambitious wave. And as much as I liked selling and making some decent money, my eyes were drawn to New York for different reasons. I wanted in someday, too. WrestleMania 1? Yes. The very first WrestleMania happened in 1985. Next year will be 30 years. Well, no, wait. 40. Uh-oh. I need to turn the TV off. It's going to start playing music, and I don't want to get a copyright claim on it. Or straight a copyright claim. But anyway, yeah. The very first WrestleMania happened on March 1985. March 31st, 1985. If my memory is serving me correctly. Next year, it will be 2025. It will be 40 years. Yeah, 40 years since WrestleMania 1. Back when, so the WWE, I even have a book here that talks about the history of WrestleMania up until WrestleMania 30, by the way, just so we're all clear on that. But this was at a time when WWE was pulling out all the stops with this show. They were pulling so many things out of their butt. Vince was pulling so many things out of his ass, literally, that he even had celebrities involved. We're talking Cyndi Lauper. We're talking Alice Cooper. We're talking Muhammad Ali. We're talking Mr. T, who were all popular names back then. Yeah, he was pulling all the stops, but before he could do that, he had to do some stuff before he could make WrestleMania. He did at least two other shows before this. and it was because of these two shows that it started and popularized, as far as WWE was concerned, the Rock and Wrestling Connection. Because those two shows that I mentioned, they were airing on the young channel, the young TV station that was MTV, Music Television. So, yeah. And as you can tell, based on how many other WrestleManias that came after it, it was no matter how you view the show nowadays, it was a huge success, and it garnered a WrestleMania 2, 3, all the way up to this year's WrestleMania 40. Yep, you can tell it was very successful. This was the start of Vince McMahon wanting to go national and basically throwing the whole territorial system out of the window because he wanted to be national. But so many people at that time did not like him doing this because they preferred doing the territorial stuff instead of going national. To them, going national was going against the old practice of wrestling. But nowadays, as you can tell, especially in America, we are national because you got WWE, TNA, you got WWE, TNA, AEW, ROH, and a month, all kinds of different places doing that stuff. Local wrestling international, yeah. Although there are some independent wrestlers that stay within a territory, but they're not territorial exactly. They will occasionally step out of their comfort zone to put on some wrestling matches for people. Yeah. We're now two chapters away from going into part 3, which is of the book, but it's technically going to be part 5 for the streams. Chapter 19, The Greatest, 1985. The fastest, most precise punches I have ever witnessed were kissing the side of my face. I ain't afraid of no snake. He better not get in my face for his own sake, said the man who was throwing them. I was put on assignment to shadow the 3-time world heavyweight champion in his home in LA for a few days. Muhammad Ali was coming to Mid-South, and he was practicing his working punches on my generous brown face. Boom, boom, Ali said as he threw perfect right after perfect right. It was day 3, and I had gotten so used to his sudden burst of punches that I was no longer fearful for my life. I'm going to throw a right, Ali said as he did just that. And then I'm going to throw a left. Ali did just that. And then I'm going to eat this sandwich, Ali said as he suddenly sat down and finished his lunch. You want to see some magic? He asked as he wiped his mouth. His energy was boundless. Watch this, he said as he reached into his pocket. He took out a coin and chomped down onto it, biting the coin in half. You see that? He asked. In fact, I had seen it. By him. The day before. And the day before that. And watch, Ali said as he blew on the coin and it magicked back together again. Oh my, I said, trying to muster up the same level of wonderment as the first few times. How did you do that? It's a miracle, he replied. I bring miracles with me everywhere I go. He wasn't wrong. I could have watched the same tricks over and over for a month. It wasn't the trick. It wasn't the miracle. It was the delivery. It was the presence. It was the childlike joy he got from it. Ali knew something that was intrinsic to the wrestling business. It wasn't what you were selling. It was how you sold it. That same principle wasn't working back in Mid-South for Cowboy, who was trying to replace his top star. Even though Watts had replaced JYD with a similarly jacked African-American man, the Snowman wasn't JYD. Not not in the charisma department, nor the box office department. So Cowboy was bringing in Ali as a special attraction for the big dome show to finally try and make the snowman a star in the fans' eyes. Watts knew his new pick needed a lot of rub, so he hired Ali and his spiritual advisor, Bundini Brown, to help corner the snowman. Across the ring would be despicable Jake the Snake Roberts, with the huge barbarian in his corner. It was all to build to a spot where Barbarian's interference necessitated Ali's involvement to level out the playing field. Behind the scenes, Jake, who was real-life son of Grizzly Smith, was not entirely thrilled with Ali's role in the match. He wanted to make sure Ali knew how to throw working punches, the kind a wrestler would throw in a match, so as to not do actual damage. That was why Ali was peppering me with bunches of fluttering working punches in LA. Bill had asked me and his son Joel to fly out to the champ's house and capture some vignettes with Ali for the upcoming TV shows. I want to show you something, the champ said as he walked down his massive hallway. I immediately followed. Anything Ali thought interesting enough to show me, I was going to look at. I watched him walk unnoticed even though he only retired for 4 years, that he was a little more unsteady, a little slower than I remembered from his boxing days. We ended up in the huge attic of his house where I spotted title belts and clips from world leaders and celebrities flowing out of the boxes they were informally packed in. Look at all this stuff, he said with a smile. One of the boxes had the corner of a gold garment hanging out. You like that? He asked as he saw my eyes drawn to the gold. I wasn't even sure what it was. Does your mama like Elvis? Ali asked as he hurried to the box and pulled out the gold jumpsuit. Absolutely she does, I replied. Why don't you take that home to her? He said as he handed it to me. Because I'm sure she would love it. What is it? I asked as I held it at arm's length to get a better look. The champ replied, That's a jumpsuit that Elvis gave me in his dressing room after one of his Las Vegas Hilton shows. It's never even been cleaned, so his sweat is still on it. Champ, I can't take this, I said as I tried to hand it back. It just wouldn't be right. You can have it, he said. No, really, I couldn't. All right, he said as he dug through another box. But it's there if you change your mind. Having something belonging to Elvis wasn't a big deal to the champ, nor was being generous. He just wanted to show a stranger from Oklahoma some cool things from down through the years. His belts, his robes, photographs, magazines, they were all just lying there. That evening, with the champ's permission, I used his home phone to call my mom collect in Oklahoma. She was totally in agreement that I shouldn't be rude enough to take such a precious gift from the champ. Truth is, I also wanted to call home so that I could obtain Ali's home phone number, which would show up on Mom's phone bill at the end of the month. I didn't want to share the number with another living soul, nor would I ever call it, but I did certainly want to have bragging rights to my friends back home in Oklahoma that I had the personal phone number of the greatest. We spent our week shooting vignettes and promos, practicing the working punch and talking about everything. Ali would begin a thought, and 20 minutes later I would be even more engaged than I was at the beginning. He had a way of crafting a position, a story, a life lesson, and wrapping it around the most entertaining delivery. I knew I was blessed to be in Ali's presence, and wrestling put me there. I learned a lot. I met an idol, spent time in his home, took his punches, watched his magic tricks, but most of all, listened. Goodbye, my Oklahoma friend, he said to me as I was leaving on the final day. We had the footage we needed and our job at the champ's house was done. Yeah, I said, not really wanting to leave. Want to see a magic trick? He asked. I dropped my bags and followed him back into his house. Champ didn't have to ask twice. He seemed happy to have the company, and I was happy to spend some more time with him. Elvis Presley's gold jumpsuit remained in the possession of Muhammad Ali, but the champ and I would reconvene several weeks later in New Orleans at the Hyatt Regency across from the Superdome. We shared a two-bedroom suite with a common living area for 3 days and nights while doing media and PR for the Dome show. Bill even managed to get him a one-day gig back in Oklahoma at a rich oilman's son's birthday party for a cool $25,000. Cowboy flew Ali to the birthday bash on his private plane. I don't know why I'm saying his own, when that word's not even in that part. Huh. As Ali and I walked down Bourbon Street together, he was like the Pied Piper, as patrons and entertainers alike filed out of the colorful NOLA establishments and followed us up and down the historic section of the city. Okay, that was just a vehicle. I watched as Ali talked to person after person about our big dome show. He rhymed and laughed and charmed. One by one, group by group, they were buying tickets to see the champ skin that snake. The crowds got so intense around us that our only way out was a ride back to the Hyatt in the police vehicle. And it was only when I got inside the hotel that I realized the champ had invited back a group of people so he could reveal stories, show them magic tricks, and talk until the early hours. When the big cowboy arrived in NOLA the next morning, he took one look at me and said, "What the hell have you been doing? You look like death." I had no issue telling my boss that I simply was trying to keep up with Muhammad Ali, and it was proven to take a lot more stamina than I had as a mere mortal. And Ali had the most amazing motor of anyone I have ever met or been around in my lifetime. We had we had hours of chats about women, lots of women, racism, our country's future, Frazier, Foreman, promoters, how he and his camp made extra money in an era when boxing stars, especially black boxing stars, still did not make what they deserved or earned. We talked extensively about food and the wonderful meals that our mothers prepared for us growing up. Ali in Louisville and me in Oklahoma, and how we loved going to Dookie Chase's restaurant in NOLA. I also found out firsthand how big a fan of pro wrestling Ali was, especially the promo skills of Gorgeous George and Freddie Blassie. The pencil neck geek. I heard them wrestlers talk, he said, and I saw the people listen. Now really listen. Some of the crowd wanted to kill them. Some of them wanted to cheer them, but all of them paid to see them. Gorgeous George and Freddie Blassie shaped the amazing verbal stylings that Muhammad developed over his unduplicated career. But the champ's mouth didn't stop Jake from worrying about his fists. On the day of the Dome show, we were in the locker room and Bill decided to show Ali how to throw a working punch. "He's worried you're going to clip him for real," Bill said about Jake. Jake stood up and replied, Who wants to take one of those punches? Would you?" he asked. As the cowboy demonstrated on Jake, Ali winked at me, and I knew Bill and Jake were getting the same routine. Ali had given me at poolside back in California. "So you want to do what again?" Ali asked, pretending not to know. "You just," Bill said as he threw another punch. "Just," he threw another one. Jake was not enjoying this tutoring session. Finally, Ali nodded and said, "I think I got it. I should be okay by the time we get out there." The champ smiled at me as he left. It looked like he was he enjoyed watching Jake panic. "Look, if he hurts you, I'll take care of you," Bill said to Jake. Wrestlers had no workers' comp and generally paid their own medical and dental bills, so I understood Jake being leery. "I don't know how his working punch is going to look," Bill proclaimed, "but however it goes, you're going to have to sell the hell out of it." I don't think it was the pain of getting hit that was aggravating Jake. It's the fact that if he was to get legit knocked out, he would be be worthless in the territory, as it would be hard to come back in the next week and threat to the good guys. But when that time came, Ali, of course, threw beautiful working punches. They looked great, and he didn't hurt Jake on one bit. Jake, however, decided that he needed to protect Jake, so he didn't sell the punches as the knockout blow Bill Watts wanted them to be. By contrast, young and up-and-coming John Nord, the Barbarian, a 6'8" monster out of Minnesota, bounced around like a ping-pong ball for the champ. But nothing could get the snowman to that level Bill wanted him at. Not even the Ali connection. Not this multiple 10-second wins he got on TV and house shows over established stars. But on that night in the Dome, the greatest had the crowd on their feet, one more time as he peppered Jake the Snake Roberts and the Barbarian with rapid-fire, smooth as silk, working punches that he perfected on my Oklahoman face. Chapter 20, Going National, 1985. If my value to this company is locked in where it is now, then I'm going to have to look elsewhere to make some money, I said to Cowboy. I knew I was being paid at least $25,000 less than the booker, but I was responsible for promotion of the live events, TV syndication, TV promos, and ad packages, plus being an on-air talent and part of the booking meetings myself. I wasn't posturing or trying to leverage anything, only my track record. When Bill had previously given me a raise, I was thrilled, but I didn't have nearly the level of responsibility or workload that I had when I sat in front of him this time. How about I bump you up to $25,000, he said. Just like that. I was hoping for a raise, but I didn't expect to get parity with the booker. Deal, I quickly replied. I'd hoped my raise in money would go some way to making things a little better at home. Bill put out his hand and I shook it accordingly. A six-figure salary was extraordinary money for someone in the office. I knew it, and I was adamant that I would work even harder to earn it. I saw the bump in money as an even bigger sign of faith in the work I was doing. I was determined to repay that faith and then some by upping my dream and my workload. Thing was, I'd had no more to give. I just didn't know it. Wrestling already had my every waking moment. I was both obsessed and worn down by it. It had a constant need for attention. Realistically, I had no more time or effort. I had no time or effort to give over to the business, but by God, I was going to try. Less sleep, more hustle, less time for my kids, more wrestling. My dangerous pattern not improving whatsoever. Little did I know that deals were being made to elevate Mid-South from a touring, mostly regional promotion to a national brand. The opportunity came when, a year before, WWF programming appeared without warning or announcement on Ted Turner's Superstation. Vince McMahon was expanding and saw the national exposure that Georgia Championship Wrestling was getting with WTBS. McMahon wanted to buy the GCW time slot so he would own all the nationally owned televised professional wrestling TV shows in the United States. Turner turned down McMahon's offer without hesitation. Ted never liked Vince, and the feelings seemed to be mutual. If Vince couldn't get on the air through Turner's TV station, he saw an opportunity to get on the air via Georgia Championship Wrestling itself. GCW was owned by four men: Ole Anderson, Jacqueline Jerry Briscoe, and Jim Barnett. The Briscoes and Barnett agreed to sell their share of the company to McMahon. WWF found its path onto WTBS. And on the Saturday night time slot Vince originally wanted, due to McMahon becoming the majority owner of GCW. Out of nowhere, fans who were accustomed to seeing predominantly NWA wrestling dating back to 1951 were treated to WWF pre-taped matches from across the nation. Gordon Soley, the voice of Georgia wrestling for over a decade, was suddenly gone and no mention was made of him. Viewer response, especially throughout the South, wasn't pretty, and TBS was flooded with calls complaining about the new wrestling programming. Turner, too, was irate with McMahon's maneuvering and his programming, and it just contained match clips and canned interviews that did little to engage the viewer. You know what they call this day, actually? It's very interesting that Jim actually brings this up. This was actually an event that was brought up, was actually discussed. Let me actually take a look, because I'm pretty sure it was mentioned on a recent episode of a certain show recently. Let me take a look. Yep, they actually got it. Dark Side of the Ring, Black Saturday. The right, the yeah, the Black Saturday. This is exactly what they're talking about here. So if you guys want to see more information about that, they got it on YouTube. Black Saturday. Just look up Black Saturday Wrestling. First thing you'll see is full Dark Side of the Ring season 5 episode 10 Black Saturday. Uh, Channel is Bangla Food Challenge. 9.8k views right now currently. And I'm pretty sure they also got.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Championship Wrestling. On behalf of WTBS, it's a pleasure to welcome the World Wrestling Federation. Exciting.
Yeah, that's. Yep, there you go. So that's pretty much talking about uh WCW really. Yeah, that was yeah, that's actually the episode right there. NWA Georgia Wrestling July 14th, 1984, Black Saturday. Yeah. Going back to where we were at. At first, Turner contracted Columbus Macon promoter Fred Ward, his son-in-law Ralph Reed, and Ole Anderson to produce a Saturday morning show to counter the WWF's presence. Championship Wrestling from Georgia brought wrestling back into the TBS studio, but with the 9:35 a.m. time slot, the shows were airing at 6:35 a.m. on the West Coast. The ratings were not good, and the talent roster gradually began to decline. Turner needed to look elsewhere. He had always liked Bill since Watts' days of booking the Georgia territory, so Ted asked Cowboy about putting Mid-South programming on his network too. Turner doesn't want Vince on his station, Bill told me. He needs a few weeks to get McMahon off there, but in the meantime he wants us to make our mark. National? I asked. Bill smiled and nodded. This is a huge opportunity for us. Could be life-changing. Lawrence always felt that he could compete with the WWF if he had the right opportunity, and this was the opportunity. The contract was for 13 weeks with the hope that if the ratings were good, and with Vince gone, Turner was going to hand over the Saturday 6:05 to 8:05 slot to Watts to produce a studio show in Atlanta. New talent was coming in, and we were ready for the big time. There were changes everywhere, especially with me. My workaholic nature began to adversely affect my personal relationship in a harsh way, especially when it came to being a father. Crown Royal and a little marijuana enabled me to self-medicate enough to stay on the road. Being impaired also helped me live with myself, the person I was becoming. I was running around in a loop of work, travel, work, and more work. On top of commentating on TV and being part of the booking meetings off TV, I was also responsible for helping run up to 14 live events a week, which I had to create world radio spot buys for. I wrote all the ads while also recording all TV spots for our local stations. When the promotion and coordination of the live events was done, I had to switch gears to provide daily updates and pitches on the growth and additions to our syndicated TV networks outside our home area. I also taped the local market TV inserts every Wednesday, which meant a full day of preparation on the Tuesday before. I looked after wrestling before I looked after my family or myself. I made sure that TV had everything it needed. I made sure the boys were set. I made sure ads were sold. Venues were booked. My homework was done for commentary, and the promos were shot, sorted, and delivered to the right stations. I looked after hundreds of details a week, except the things I should have been looking after. When it came to my kids, I made sure I met my financial responsibilities, but little else. Wrestling was always calling, and its call could be cruel sometimes. Our show on TBS, Mid-South Wrestling, not only debuted as the number one program on Superstation, but was the number one program on all of cable, including all of WWF shows on the USA Network. The first rating of 5.7 for the month of March was a full point ahead of McMahon's Tuesday Night Titans on USA. For context, Tuesday Night Titans was like the WWF talk show, and they brought so many people on. That's that's Tuesday Night Titans. I would know this because I've watched a few episodes. While they do occasionally show matches on the show, it is primarily a talk show. For 3 months that Mid-South Wrestling aired on TBS, it was the top-rated program of any kind on cable television. It was also canceled. Turner met Jim Crockett at the Yacht Club, Watts said. Crockett offered to get Vince off TBS if Turner gave him exclusive rights to wrestling on the station. Vince McMahon, sensing the backlash to his show on TBS and seeing Watts rising as a national competitor, sold his coveted TV slot to Carolina's Virginia promoter Jim Crockett for $1 million. Turner was having a hard time moving Vince off his station because of a clause in the contract that stated McMahon had the right to sell the contract to another promoter if his show was canceled or forced off the superstation. Vince sold the remaining weeks of the TBS contract to Jim Crockett Jr., with the clause that Crockett's show would be the exclusive wrestling broadcast on TBS. So Vince was gone from TBS, but so was Watts. Cowboy had 9 weeks remaining on his TBS deal, where both Crockett and Cowboy were on station. In our final month, Mid-South Wrestling averaged a 5.5 rating for the May sweeps. Crockett's World Championship Wrestling averaged a 4.8. Even on the way out, Mid-South was the ratings leader. As quickly as the dream slot on TBS came, it went. Again, Cowboy wanted to talk to the folks at home. This is our last show, he said down to the camera. We've enjoyed becoming reacquainted with so many of you in the Atlanta area and the people we've heard from across the nation. The Crockett organization is going to produce the exclusive wrestling program for WTBS. They're a fine organization, and I encourage all of you to be as loyal to them as you have been to us all these last 13 weeks. I secretly hoped for Watts and Crockett to team up, because both men together could have taken the number one spot in wrestling, but it wasn't to be. After the last show was over, I walked to Cowboy's office and took a seat in silence. Turner didn't keep his word, Bill said as he sat at his desk in disbelief. He screwed me. I could see the Cowboy was hurting. We were both burned out by the wrestling business, but neither of us were willing to admit it. What's the plan? I asked. We go national, Watts replied. But we change. We evolve. We go national, Bill said. You with me? As tired and as beat up as I was, I didn't even have to think about it. I put out my hand for him to shake, just like he put out his hand for me to shake when I asked for a raise. I knew that the tiny amount of time I had for my family was about to get even less. Even though Vern Gagne's American Wrestling Association had a tenuous claim to being national with an ESPN contract, with Watts throwing his cowboy hat into the ring, it really meant that there was going to be three legitimate national wrestling companies in the U.S. Watts, Crockett, and McMahon. If we're going to compete with these guys, we need to change our name, Cowboy said. Something less regional. You got something in mind? I asked. I certainly do, he replied. I needn't have asked. Of course he did. So next time on our book reading for this, I'll be doing part 3 and part 4 of this book. So that means we'll be reading part 3, UWF, 1986 to 1987, and part 4, Crockett, 1987 to 1988. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a short read, this one, based on the number of pages that you see here. But don't worry. Yeah, but don't worry. This is part 5 right here. And that is literally all part 6. But, in any case, that was Slobberknocker, My Life in Wrestling so far. I'll be live streaming and doing another reading stream today. Continuing, if the camera will not do that, we'll be continuing to read the book that I haven't read in a while alongside this book, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. I'll be reading chapters 10 through 14. Yep, that's what we're doing. So with that all being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. Hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time, this is Forrest Walpole, signing off.